Hello, and welcome to today's Global Fleet Champions webinar. Global Fleet Champions is a partnership campaign administered by Break, the road safety charity, to prevent deaths, injuries and pollution caused by vehicles driven for work. Visit our website globalfleetchampions.org to find out more. In today's webinar, sponsored by Lytx, we will be discussing effective drive training. Driving is one of the most dangerous activities that most people do at work, so it is essential that your drivers are equipped with the knowledge and skills they need. Effective training, making the most of all modern platforms, not only help keep your drivers safe on the roads, but it also demonstrates your commitment to health and safety and can help improve staff retention. In today's webinar, you will learn why having in-depth comprehensive driver training programs are essential for safe and healthy transport operations, the essential elements of driver training courses to eliminate risky driving behaviour, and how to make the most of driver metrics, gamification and other techniques to maximise the effectiveness of your training. Thank you for your time, and the webinar will now begin.
Damien Penny, and it's a privilege for me and for Lytx to be able to sponsor this event, whose ultimate goal is in saving lives. This is an important time as any to be discussing road safety when many delivery vehicles are being asked to work extraordinary shifts at the moment to ensure our shelves are full, more shifts, getting goods to site faster, and the worry about what's happening at home or with the extended family is a significant distraction to drivers, causing increased safety risks. Action needs to be taken and needs to be taken quickly. And improving the skills of our drivers is critical, but it's an ongoing journey. Roads are getting busier, more technology is being introduced, and additional distractions are appearing. And so we need to ensure our drivers have the skills they need to perform at their best 100% of the time. At Lytx, our solutions look to support companies' trainings initiatives by using technology to help identify risk and allow coaching sessions to take place either in the moment or soon after an event takes place. The coaching is to provide more of a course correction or an impromptu training session to address a problem before a more serious event happens. I was at a show recently where presenters were in the middle of an audience. It allowed me to walk around the outside of the room, and I noticed that for any one presenter, on average around 20 to 25% of the audience were on their mobile phones, were distracted in general, or were actually asleep. Now, I'm not sure if I'd called anybody out at that particular moment, I'm sure they would have said that they were totally engaged with the presentation. So when it was my turn to speak and get up on stage, I relayed this to this message to the audience. Their first reaction obviously was to put their mobile phones down. But the question I asked them then was, how many of your drivers are like you, on their phones, yet believe they're totally engaged with what is going on around them? I paused and obviously nobody answered the question. And then I said to them, but how would you even know? Now, the Lytx technology is uniquely looking to use video and other sensors, plus machine vision and artificial intelligence, to identify and highlight risk before an incident happens, so that it can be coached and the driver can return to the road with their skills sharpened. It also allows you to see what's happening on the road so you can take focused action and adapt your training courses accordingly. Now, although we're a technology company, we really truly believe that the most important technology in the cab is the driver. And as such, our goal is that no commercial driver will ever be the cause of a collision. Through a combination of technology, human engagement through training, and other initiatives such as the Global Fleet Champions, real smart safety programs and training can be designed and have a real impact. So this is why we support the Global Fleet Champion campaign and the Brakes organization, because our goals and our global reach are aligned, and together with your help on this call today, we can have a positive impact on road safety. So my job today was to give you an introduction to the webinar and why safety on the road is really important, and even more important today than ever. I'm now going to look to hand you over to the next speaker for the presentation. Thank you for listening and have a good webinar.
First thing to consider is, why should businesses even care about road safety? Initially, businesses might not think it necessary to train their staff who drive for work. After all, employees have passed a driving test, so hasn't the government already said they are safe to drive? Some companies might have a reluctance to give extra training due to the cost. However, many organisations have identified that it makes financial sense to manage this risk and recognise they also have a moral duty of care. In the UK, it is actually written into health and safety law that employers must take steps to manage driving at work risk effectively. Road traffic legislation imposes specific requirements on employers in respect of vehicle use and maintenance. But employers also have responsibility under existing health and safety legislation to ensure, so far as is reasonably practicable, the health and safety of their employees and others who may be affected by their work activities. This includes the activity of driving on public roads. There is a strong business case for managing work-related road safety. Fewer road incidents mean less days lost to injury, fewer repairs to vehicles, fewer missed orders, and reduced running costs overall. Let's consider the risks for at-work drivers just for a moment. Think about the extra hours and the risk of tiredness and fatigue. Higher mileage. Driving on high-risk road types such as rural and urban areas. We all know that motorways are the safest environment, but many drivers don't spend all of their time on the motorway. Work-related time pressure and stress. Working shifts and the effects that that is going to have on our thoughts and our feelings as an individual. Driving conditions, thinking about the different weather that we'll have to experience and the traffic and unfamiliar routes. Driving at night, where statistically 40% of incidents are occurring. Unfamiliar vehicles. Distractions, thinking about our mobile phone and our sat-nav as we're rerouting as we're driving. There are also human factors to consider. When was the last time a driver had an eye test, for example? There's also the risk of increased anxiety, and some people do suffer from low confidence. Equally, there are other drivers who experience driving excitement and overconfidence, and all of this goes into the mix. Human factors are extremely important to consider. So what actually are the safest forms of travel? Well, unfortunately, it's not driving. The safest form of travel is to travel by aircraft, and last year in the UK, there were just 15 incidents. The next safest form of travel is the rail. The rail casualty statistics for 2018 were 17, but unfortunately this was the highest in the past 10 years. And yet compared to driving, in 2018, the UK road casualty statistics were 1,782, and unfortunately, last year in 2019, that increased by 4% to 1,870. Flying and travelling by rail is safer due to legislation and training, but we just simply don't put the same efforts into driving. Think about it this way. Would you get on a plane if you were told the daily safety checks had been skipped because the plane was serviced last month? Probably not. Driving is probably the most dangerous thing we do each day. 5 people die on Britain's roads every day. 1 in 3 deaths involved or are caused by someone driving at work at the time. 170,000 people are injured every year, and 60,000 people are seriously injured, and by that we mean life-changing. Up to a quarter of all incidents may involve someone who is driving for work. So in conclusion, all organizations employing people who drive for work need to take this seriously. They need to make sure they have the skills and knowledge necessary to keep their workers safe on the roads. A robust driver training program is essential for any organization to manage work-related road risk, protect its drivers and other road users, reduce repair costs and vehicle downtime, and of course, cut insurance premiums and improve their driver retention. It really does make financial sense to offer a tangible return on investment. But what about this return on investment? The impact of coaching on high-risk drivers, linking coaching interventions to collision rates directly, is generally difficult to perform. However, the request for this link is increasingly common amongst companies focused on measuring outcomes and justifying their investment. In a recent study, DriveTech analyzed the real-life impact of its on-road coaching approach in a fleet which included around 100 drivers identified as being at high risk. A reduction of 0.93 fewer collisions per driver was noted in the first 6-month period after training, a significant drop of 85% in the number of collisions. Let's look at that in a graph. So in the 6 months running up to the training, on average, there was 1.9 collisions per driver. In that 6-month period, there were 110 collisions. Immediately after the training, this was reduced to just 16 collisions. And within the 12 months after the training, there was only a minor increase to 25 collisions overall. But that isn't the only important statistic. Think about the costs. So as we look at the cost of collisions in the 6 months running up to the training, the average cost per collision was £385, £39,000 in total. But the average cost per collision after the training was only £41 per collision, rising within the 12 months afterwards to £80 per collision. So as you can see, the driver is having considerably less serious incidents. So although they're still maybe having an incident, it is less serious when it happens. So this is an important factor to consider. When you consider this overall, the average cost of a typical intervention for this group would be about £7,500, less the cost of 30 collisions, in that 12-month saving of £19,470, taking off the cost of the training, and you can see a clear return on investment of almost £12,000. It is important for us to consider the best approach to driver training. Businesses should consider an approach to assessment and training that recognizes the different needs and character traits of the individual, and therefore should target their interventions using the EU Goals for Driver Education Matrix. This should be the foundation for a curriculum that addresses both driver attitude as well as behavior. The GDE matrix focuses on 5 key areas. Firstly, it looks at the basic skills for driving and maneuvering, and often when people go for an additional driver training intervention, this section will be revisited to check that the basic skills are good enough. In addition to that, the second area that is focused upon is the mastery of traffic situations, how we interact with others, how we approach traffic lights, roundabouts, and so on, making it the most efficient way of driving possible. And of course, we're all interested in fuel-efficient driving these days. But it doesn't stop there. The Goals for Driver Education Matrix specifically recognizes that there is a need to identify that the reason for the journey actually has an impact on the driver and the way they behave. So a driver that is perhaps running late for an appointment may change their behavior. Now, this, of course, is linked to an emotional response to the situation that they find themselves in. So it's extremely important that any driver training, coaching conversation looks at the emotions, the thoughts, and the feelings that drive that person's behavior. And finally, the fifth element that was actually introduced in 2010 are the cultural influences that affect driver attitudes. And of course, there are many cultural influences, and we identify that even when we travel from one type of environment to another. Most people will say to you, oh, you need to drive a different way when you drive in London. That's not always the truth of the matter, but it feels that way, that you need to adopt a different style of driving. And so already we're recognizing that there is a cultural change, and there will be a cultural influence within the company, within that person's peer group, just so many effects upon the driver. So to approach this correctly, we need an holistic approach that looks at all 5 areas as identified by the GDE matrix. We hope you found this introduction a useful insight as to why driver training is essential. Thank you.
Hello all, my name's Tony Greenwich, Business Development Director for IAM RoadSmart, and I'm going to take you through a short presentation on some tactics you can use for embedding a driver risk management program. The first thing I think businesses need to do in order to embed a program in their business is to actually create a fleet policy. And at the moment, certainly in the UK, the pace of change in terms of legislation and vehicle technology is probably the greatest that it's been in living memory. So it's really important that a fleet policy reflects those changes and is reviewed regularly to make sure that it keeps pace with what's going on in the wider market. It's also really important for drivers to recognize that there are very clearly defined processes that determine what they should be doing when they're driving for work. And there are consequences, perhaps, if they don't comply with the fleet policy or indeed with any legal legislation. It's also important, I think, that a policy should embrace the culture of your business. So you may be a business that has a very green agenda. So you might want your policy to reflect that in terms of general travel and choice of vehicle. So you can really make sure that those things are joined up. It's important to make sure that your drivers understand and confirm that they understand the policy, they've read it. And a good time to do that is when the driver first starts in the business. So as part of their induction, it's a useful thing to perhaps get them to read the policy and make sure that they understand how it impacts their particular role. It's also really important to make sure that any fleet policy satisfies the current health and safety legislative requirements. It's really important to do that because drivers shouldn't be unaware of the major things that might impact on them when they're driving for business, and having a policy that really reinforces those messages is important. And in many businesses, the enforcement of policy or the management of policy at a local level is done by line managers. And this is where one of the challenges can come, because the administering of that policy and how it's applied needs to be seen to be consistent. And very often you can get into a situation where drivers are allowed to flout the rules because, you know, they're a very good salesperson, or they're a very good engineer, or they're an important person in the business. In businesses where fleet policies and driver risk management strategies work really well, you see that those rules are applied consistently across all drivers. So that getting that fleet policy up and running, understood by all, is step number one. Step number two is setting the scope of your driver risk management requirement. And one of the things we find here is that some businesses are put off here because they fear that once they've lifted the lid, there could be quite a hefty cost associated with putting processes in place, and that doesn't necessarily need to be the case. The scope of your requirement really falls into three categories. The absolute minimum that I think is recognised now, certainly in the UK, as best practice is that you should at least make sure that the driver has a valid licence, both in terms of is it live and is the driver entitled to use the category of vehicle that they'll be driving on business. And over the last 20 years, we've seen the explosion of organisations that now provide very comprehensive and professional driver licence checking services at actually very competitive costs. So the minimum is what we should be doing there is licence checking. We then move on to something again that's gained in momentum over the last 10 years, which is e-learning, a very cost-effective way to give drivers bite-sized chunks of information or test their knowledge on certain aspects of driving, whether it be the highway code, whether it be their ability to identify hazards. This is a very efficient way to constantly drip feed drivers with information that they may find useful when driving. And third is the traditional on-road training session with a professional coach. 20 years ago, if you had a poor driver, your only option was to put them with an on-road coach. Now, of course, there are things that you can do like e-learning that can perhaps reduce the need to put drivers in a vehicle. And I think that's where many businesses have a concern, because they consider driver risk management with on-road driver training sessions, which can cost anything between 180 to 200 pounds per half day. And that might seem quite costly to a business. The reality is, in our experience, having this kind of three-step process normally results in around 10 to 12% of drivers being identified as those that may have some sort of on-road requirement. So actually, it's not as expensive as you might think. The other thing to mention here is, again, technology and the access to data in terms of fleet data has never been greater than it is today. But that's coincided with a demise in the role of the traditional fleet manager. So actually, lots of information around the fleet is now going to various different people within the same organization. But what we have found is that in organizations where they're able to collate all of that relevant information together, the ability to look at that information in terms of what was it telling them before they did training and what does it tell them after, gives them the real opportunity to measure the value and the impact that that training has made. So wherever possible, you should look to try and use the data that is available to help monetize or demonstrate the value that your investment in driver risk management has made. In terms of step 3, optimizing your resource, this is kind of linked to that concern that many businesses have around costs. And this is an example actually just taken from a few weeks ago, where we had a fleet with 1,000 drivers spread across 30 locations. When we got talking to the fleet director, he calculated that they had about 1.5 full-time employees dedicated to license and vehicle data checking, based spread across those 30 locations. And there were a number of challenges that they faced with that, and the cost of that FTE being around £25,000 per year. But the challenges faced with things like the data was often maintained on multiple spreadsheets. So their local resource was often tied up chasing drivers to get the bare minimum of information. and across their multiple sites, they had varying levels of compliance. And actually, that's quite a typical story where you have organizations that are trying to manage that process in-house, and in most cases, not doing it particularly well. I talked earlier about the evolution of license checking as a service, and what we see now is that typically a license check can be purchased for around £4 per driver per check. And when we looked in this particular example, we calculated that 1.5 FTE that this business was currently spending would reduce to maybe half an FTE, because that time would be spent working with the outsourced provider rather than actually doing the physical chasing of drivers themselves and managing multiple spreadsheets, etc., etc. So when we start to look at the advantages and opportunities that something like this can create, we worked out that the total outsourced cost of license checking based on half a head and the cost of the license checks themselves came to £16,500. The 1.5 FTEs was costing them 37.5. So actually there was an immediate or potential saving of 21,000. Plus they got the opportunity to free up that FTE head to focus on other activities. So there's an additional bonus in terms of they've got the equivalent of one person now who could do other tasks that would generate opportunities for the business. No more manual spreadsheets and online systems that create stakeholder access at each location and full reporting capability. The screenshots that have just come up are typical examples of the kind of information that license check providers are able to give you. So a breakdown of an individual license by category. You will get a risk evaluation based on age, number of points, and all those sorts of factors. So it's much slicker, much more professional, much easier to manage, and that's the way that the market's going. And if you can deliver financial benefit and saving through efficiencies, then it really does make sense that this is the way to go. So once you've optimized your resource, one of the things that we talk to people about is take a structured but mixed approach. There's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all for every situation. What we're finding now, particularly with the evolution of e-learning and e-learning platforms, is there's a real opportunity to kind of move away from the traditional focus of those platforms, which was about testing drivers' knowledge. And we can move now to sharing best practice with them and also providing them with educational content that really adds value to their role rather than being seen as something that's there to try and catch them out. So some examples would be, here we've got a van with some very specific racking and a configuration that's clearly bespoke to this particular job or maybe business. Very easy to create a simple video that the e-learning platform could house, that could be shown to drivers as part of their induction. They may be asked some questions about it just to test their knowledge. And that's really helping to instill that best practice into a driver's mindset from day one. You've then got your traditional testing e-learning modules covering things like managing speed, parking and maneuvering, managing distractions, understanding alcohol. There's various of them, and that's the traditional kind of e-learning that we see out there. And then you can go on to educational, and this is where there's lots of very powerful and emotional video content that's available in the public domain, and then more and more often now we're seeing e-learning capabilities where that those videos can be pulled across and can be made available to drivers. And what you're trying to do there is you're trying to pull at that driver's heartstrings. It's very difficult for someone to look at a video where somebody may be talking emotionally about what happened to a loved one, a member of their family killed by distracted driving or something like that. And what we're trying to do is get those drivers to come away from watching that and think, do you know what, maybe I need to consider my own behaviors. Do I really need to take that call? Do I need to use my handset? So e-learning now, in terms of the way that the market is moving, is giving businesses much more flexibility in what they can use that capability for. Why is embedding a DRM strategy important? And we kind of look at this from a couple of angles. So if we assume that you're a senior fleet decision maker, and one of your drivers has been involved in an incident, and as a result of that, you as that senior decision maker were asked to meet with the victim of that incident. If you go into that meeting and you don't feel comfortable with the content or the way that your company car policy or driving risk management strategy has been applied, then essentially you have a problem. Because really, you want to be able to sit across the table and demonstrate that you took fair and reasonable steps in order to prevent that incident from happening. So if you look at that from that perspective, and then if you look at it from a victim's perspective and say, well, how would you feel if the fleet decision maker across the table said to you, well, you know, we've got 1,000 employees spread across 30 locations. You know, it's really difficult for us to make sure that we check everybody's license. And, you know, in 3 of those branches, we've got nobody doing the admin, so it's really hard for us to keep on top of that. You know, we've got all this telematics data coming in from our 1,000 drivers. We really haven't got the time to go through it, to identify the speeders and the people that are doing things that maybe need looking at. You know, we're really sorry for what happened. If you were the victim of that, would that explanation sit comfortably with you? And I don't think it would. So what we're saying here is try to put a strategy in place that allows you to have a conversation with somebody that says that you can demonstrate you've taken all fair and reasonable steps. So in terms of a summary, getting the basics right, and we talked about that journey earlier on. So the basics is put a license check process in place, have some form of cost-effective e-learning based set of interventions. Where you can, embellish those with tutorials that help your driver in terms of what they're trying to do on a day-to-day basis. Maybe go that extra mile in making access to more powerful emotional content available to really help drivers understand the consequences of what poor driving behavior looks like. And actually, if you can do those things, it really is not complicated. There are many suppliers out there that offer that whole journey. So it's doesn't have to be difficult, and it's not expensive. The image there shows you a cup of coffee and a pastry. Basically, to put the process that's highlighted on the left of that screen there in place, per driver per month, for the cost of a coffee and a pastry, that's all it would be. I hope that this little overview of embedding driver risk management has been useful. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Zano from Unitrans Africa. I'm the SHEC manager in charge of the safety, health, environment, and security, working in Unitrans Botswana. I'm just going to give you a rundown of how we have implemented our driver training program for the past 10 years at Botswana. I've just put this slide to show you that we have moved from good to great. However, we are still on the path to reach greater heights. Just to give you a background on Botswana as a country, we are a Southern African landlocked country with borders. We share borders with South Africa, Zimbabwe, Namibia, and Zambia. Our democracy is 52 years old. We're a former British protectorate with a little population of 2.3 million people. The size of the country is just about the size of Texas or France. We have a stable political climate. And I'm proud to say that we are celebrating 51 years in Botswana this year as Unitrans Botswana. Our economy in Botswana is based on diamond exports, making up the large part of what we get as a country. And tourism contributes a lot as well, beef exports, and also mining. Just to give you an idea as to how strong our currency is, it's 10 pula for $1 US. As I mentioned before, Unitrans Botswana is now 51 years old. We employ about 445 drivers that are doing long-haul driving. By long-haul, I mean anything from 200 kilometers return journey to 3,500 kilometers return journey. And we are operating 278 vehicles, most of which are hauling petroleum products, which will be your petrol, your diesel, your gases, and all that. And our average fleet age is about 4 years. We are running Scanias, we are running Volvos, we are running also Mercedes-Benz. So it's quite a mixture of brands that we're using for our vehicles. Just to get into the driver training academy. Our driver training academy was established in 2007 after having went for a long time without any driver training in place. I think we just used to run the business like any other business, amateurs, not having any processes in place in terms of training our drivers and upskilling them to be better drivers. However, we saw it fit to adopt best practices that we were seeing from our colleagues, competitors, and also from international best practices. And we established our driver training. We got our senior drivers that were outstanding drivers to become driver trainers. They went through the training for handling adult education, for being assessors. We upskilled them with the advanced defensive driving skills. They went on those courses. As you all know, conveyor of dangerous goods or hazardous goods is not like carrying a load of sand or a lot of bricks. It involves a lot of work and safety measures that has to be put in place in order for a load or a driver to leave a place go and load, come back to base without experiencing any incident or without encountering any trouble on the road. So with the experienced driver trainers that we have in class, we saw that they added much value because they have the practical experience of having worked in the industry. They have the knowledge of what the drivers are facing on the roads. They have that first-hand experience, and they will be able to impart that knowledge to the other drivers. That made it easier for our drivers to learn from them. It's easier for them to communicate because they are talking the same language. They understand each other better. It's not like when you have a professional who has not had time to be on the road much, but just not basic knowledge from the books and comes to teach. But you need someone that is well experienced, well versed in handling the vehicle, that knows the routes, that knows the culture or of the people on the road and how they behave on the road. The immediate benefits that we saw from this move when we established our driver training academy is that the driver morale immediately went up. This meant that drivers were interested. They saw that they became part of the company in a way. The company was valuing them in a way. They were now being called professional drivers, not just drivers. We termed them professional drivers, we termed them bulk vehicle operators, and in some ways, those that are outstanding, we even term them pilots. And for all the training that they go through, they received certificates, and this meant something to them. Maybe if you are in the Western world, you might not understand this, but here where we are, receiving a certificate is huge recognition for some people that have not seen the door of a school or high school or college. And drivers then strive to become better. You know, it was set up in a way that it was a competition, positive competition. Who is going to be outstanding? Who is going to drive better? Who is going to top the driver's league? And we saw that positive competition kicking in amongst the drivers. And because of this training that you are giving to the drivers, which is consistent, which is the same, we saw consistent service delivery at the end of the day, because each driver is aware of what is expected of them. They implement it the same way. So our customers are receiving that consistency in service delivery. The long-term benefits that we see, and some of which we are beginning to realize now, is reduced driver turnover. Where you have higher wages, you keep people, yes, but you know it is not only wages that keep people. People needs training, people needs to be valued. So once you bring in that training module into part of people's work, it helps them to grow as people. They learn other things that they were not aware of. And that sense of growing, that sense of growth makes them want to stay and keep their jobs. We have seen ourselves housing professional and responsible drivers because of the training that we are giving them, and that keeps them disciplined and well applied to their work. And this gives a good reputation for the company as well. We saw a number of contracts that were with our competitors come to us. We won them because of our safety records, the behavior of our drivers, you know, everything that was coming through the training that we put, or the investment that we put into the training programs. This helped to upskill our drivers to be seen as quality, responsible drivers, and customers wanted to be associated with that. We saw a significant reduction in road crashes. I'm sure we will see that in the next slides that are going to come up. This was a huge cost to us because we used to have a mentality from top to bottom, not putting it on drivers, that road crashes will always happen. But we finally got to a point where we can say, no, road crashes can be prevented. So our aim is to ensure that we prevent those road crashes that we can prevent. You might not be the one that is at fault on the road. You might not be the one that is causing the crash, but if you can prevent it, make sure you do it. So defensive driving to us came as a bigger part of this significant drop in road crashes. We also saw a reduction in our road traffic fines and violations through training, practical and theory. It meant that our drivers do understand the consequences of having traffic fines, the consequences of having violations such as speeding, harsh braking, fuel economy, and all not following the green brand driving. It meant that they are now taught in class that the way they drive on the road impact on the company's bottom line at the end of the day. They might not see it. If you are doing harsh braking every time and you are not driving in a fuel economic way, or you are not driving in the green band, that means we are losing on maintenance, we are losing on fuel costs, we are losing on all these other hidden costs that they would not really see when you are in the truck. But when it comes down to the bottom line, your fuel costs are high, your tire costs are high, your maintenance costs are high. So all these new contracts started coming back to us, and we actually got awarded 6 huge contracts in the last 10 years. And the main reasons was your road crashes rates, your incident rates, and the behavior of your drivers are well much better than our competitors. That is the response that we got from our customers. So as I was saying, you can see that a massive reduction in the past 10 years, of which I am very proud of this. I know our goal should be 0 road crashes because we do not want to lose any lives on the road. We do not want to lose any equipment or property due to road crashes, but this is a massive reduction that we are so proud of. From having a total number of road crashes in the 130s to only having below 20 in a year, that's really outstanding. Our drivers have taken responsibility of this, and they know exactly what is expected of them through the various training programs that we have put in place. You will see as we go down the training modules that we are teaching them. So the first module that is practical in theory is defensive driving. We are using the internationally recognized Smith system for driving, where the drivers are taught all the 5 keys for Smith system, and also the K53, which is almost the same as Smith system, but it's just worded in a different way. These have brought so much massive results for us in terms of reduction in road crashes. We used to see incidences where third parties were on the wrong. We used to see incidences where third parties were on the wrong, but when we do investigation, you see that, okay, of course, the third party was on the wrong here, but what could our driver have done in order to prevent this incident? And this question can only come when you have completed or when you are aware of defensive driving. If you are not aware of it, you can simply put it, oh, this road crash was caused by a third party, then you move on. But if you are in a defensive driving mind, you really have to dig down to see, if I was the one behind the wheel, what could I have done to prevent this incident? Of course, this person is coming down my lane straight, bumping into me. But had I lifted up my eyes, seeing far much ahead and anticipating what can happen, I could have maybe pulled off the road or done something to prevent that incident from happening. So those are the things that they will be learning in class. Then they also are taking on the road, and all those keys, they are assessed while the driver is driving down the road. Then we also have another module called operating a rigid track drawbar or any vehicle combination. This is also done theoretically in class, and also they are taken on the road, being taught different types of vehicle combinations, how to maneuver a rigid and drawbar track, how to maneuver an interlink, how to maneuver a super link, how to maneuver a semi-trailer. There are different modules that they go through in this operating a vehicle module. Then we have a module on conveyor of dangerous goods or hazardous goods. This is specifically on how to handle petroleum products or hazardous goods, where they are taught various things and safety methods to apply while they are on the road. The fourth one is also emergency response, what to do in case of emergency when you're on the road, who to contact, and how as a person to react to that. How do you respond to that? They're also taught first aid and also firefighting level 1. Then there's a part of their training that we call soft skills. These are modules that are mainly theoretical, and they are awareness courses. Customer service, how do you deal with customers? They are drivers. However, at the end of the day, they are the people that are the face of the company when on the road, the face of the company when doing deliveries. So customers can range from our customers per se, other road users, colleagues on the road, and many other people that they get in touch with. They can be their customers. So how do you handle all those things? Then we have environmental awareness, where they are taught about the environment. The third one is dealing with road rage. As huge trucks on the road, they face a lot of challenges. Other motorists will say they are too slow. Other motorists will say they are blocking the way. They don't give them a chance to overtake. There are many, many, many accusations that come there. Other motorists will come and cut in front of them. They think they are taking, they are keeping a very good following distance, but other motorists think that's the chance for me to cut into that space. So there are many challenges that they face, and they need to be taught on how to deal with road rage on the road. They are also taught about HIV and AIDS awareness. As you are aware, this is a worldwide challenge that we are facing, and in Africa, it's even a bigger challenge for us. It's even a much bigger challenge for our drivers that spend the whole week out, 2-3 days out from their homes and families. And you know what happens when they're in truck stops in various areas of the road. They're exposed to different kind of things that you need to make them aware on how to protect themselves while they're out there. Then they are taught on fatigue management, how to manage their fatigue, what to do, what not to do, how they must sleep, how they must rest in order for them to be always fresh when they come on duty, to be fit for duty. They are also taught about nutrition and diet, what they should eat, what they should not eat. These are simply recommendations as to how they should manage their diet, because as truckers, you're sitting on the truck the whole day, driving through. Most of them, they will be buying fast foods on the road, cool food that is not prepared well. So they need to be aware that they should take a lot of water, they should take fruits and vegetables just to keep themselves healthy. They should do also exercises every morning before they start off from their trucks. They just do random exercises to keep fit. And they are also taught on stop work authority or responsibility. They are given that authority to stop any work that is unsafe. It starts from their vehicle. If the vehicle is not fit to go out from the depot, if something is wrong with the vehicle, they have the authority to stop that work. If he sees that the vehicle is not safe and probably the supervisor is forcing him to move because he wants the load to go, the driver has got the right to stop and escalate the issue to the next level above the supervisor, to say the truck, it has a problem with brakes. I reported this. It has not been attended in the workshop, but I'm being told that I should move on and go. So they have that right to exercise that stop work authority. So just to go back on our driver management, this has evolved over the past 10 years. This is not just what we implemented in 2007 and we had everything. As time was moving, we kept on getting in best practices from various areas and applying ourselves to be the best that we can. So our recruitment process is now well outlined. When we recruit our drivers, we need someone with 3 years articulated experience, and they do write a theory test and also a practical driving test they go through. So once the driver has passed all those exams, they go through a medical process where they are checked if they are fit, and then they are attached into the class for a 1 full month of learning on all those theory modules. After they pass that, they are attached to a senior driver. They will be co-driving with that senior driver for about 2 to 3 months, depending on how fast they catch and how fast they learn. This is all done to ensure that we change the behavior of the driver from when he was outside Unitrans to know the culture of Unitrans, the safety culture, the road safety culture of Unitrans, how to handle vehicles, how we drive. It is all based on that. We need to change the behavior of the driver to suit the Unitrans culture. So the mentor driver will be completing assessments forms that are submitted to the driver trainer. And once the mentor driver says that the trainee driver is fine, the driver trainer will check him on 1 long haul trip, assessing his driving, his loading, his offloading, and all the other aspects of the training that he went through. So our driver fitness medicals are done annually. And after the medicals are done, the driver goes in for a week's refresher training on all those modules that we were talking about before, both theory and practical. Coaching and mentoring is done for each driver every 6 months. This is when the driver trainers will be going into the vehicles with the drivers for about 30 to 40 minutes. At a go, he just jumps into the vehicle with the driver. The drive along the road, he just sees how he is behaving, and there are forms that they use to measure that. Then we have a system in place which we call a driver's league. Our drivers are ranked considering their driving performance, which is measured by onboard computers and mixed telematics. They will be looking at also the incident records, the complaints or compliments, the rate of them reporting any proactive measures like reporting of near misses or potential incidences so that they can be sorted out. So with all those being put into a league form, they will give a driver a score. And any driver that is from 95% to 100% is gold. From 90% to 94% is silver. And anything from 80 to 89, that's bronze. From 79 going downwards, it's red and it's unacceptable. So it is a very high standard that we have put in place to ensure that all our drivers are the best that they can be on the road and also behavior-wise. So these drivers leagues cumulatively after a year, they'll form the driver of the year, which will get an award. We have formed some recognition awards that we are giving out every year. We give the best driver per contract, the best driver overall, the whole company. Then we have different categories that we consider as well. As we are aware, the cost of training a driver to be a best driver that you require, it's huge. So losing drivers because of other small issues in the company, they can be disciplinary matters, they can be road crashes or any other issues. It is not ideal to lose an employee. So we need to retain our staff as much as possible. Hence, we came up with a disciplinary matrix per se. For other items that are safety related, that are governed by our policies to say you can never drive a vehicle without wearing a seatbelt. You can never drive a vehicle or use your mobile phone whilst you are driving a vehicle. Those are things that are unforgiven. Immediately, our drivers know if you cross that line, then you will be out of the company. We would rather have you sitting at home or go to another employer than to have you kill yourself in our custody. That is what we preach and that is what we practice. So any other behaviors or other violations, you can get a first chance, second chance, a written warning, and suspension for a number of days. However, when it comes to other violations that are directly linked, and we have all seen all the researches and all the things that come into place, the international researches that are done on not wearing a seatbelt, on using a mobile phone while driving. The end result, we all know that it's death at the end of the day. So we actually put that into their minds to say, if you drive a vehicle and you are not wearing a seatbelt and you are caught, this is what it means. Just trying to influence their behavior change through this matrix. However, the system that we are trying to implement or put in place is to ensure that we have that behavioral based approach, as I was saying, where we do have systems that are managing our various processes in the organization. Not only programs that are start and end, but a continuous cycle where we continuously monitor ourselves. Is our training really effective? Or are we gaining results? As you can see from our training programs, we are really seeing massive results. But if something is not really giving you results, you need to to check it over and over again to see what can we do to improve, which one is what we have been doing. We look at our values, as I was talking about culture. When drivers are coming in, they need to know your culture, your safety culture, your road safety culture, what you focus on. All you talk about is not push as many loads as you can. All you are saying is go and deliver and come back the same way you have went, without any incident, and go back to your family. We want to be leaders and coaches in this thing. What I mean by that is that you are leading by example. When you are training one thing in class, that you don't use your cell phone while it's driving. Don't do it. You as a manager now, as you drive out from your depot, you're using your cell phone while you're driving. We also want to focus on our losses, the consequences of a loss. And we put this as everyone's responsibility. Not only that I, as a manager, am responsible, but no, everyone is responsible. When you are on a vehicle on the road, it's your responsibility to make sure that you go and you are safe on the road, the public is safe on the road, and other third parties are safe on the road. And we encourage that open communication from bottom up to say, if you find anything that is not working well on the ground, please report it and it should be sorted out. That's where we can be so proactive and sort out things that are before they get out of hand. And we are also looking at fact finding, looking for our root causes, so that when we find the root cause, we sort it out. We do not want it to reoccur. Then we want to focus on our behavior change, which influences what a driver does on the road, which influences what a driver doesn't do on the road. So the behavior is most important. Behavior change is most important for us. And also to encourage positive reinforcement, where we recognize good work, we recognize safe behavior on the road. We also do conduct our internal appraisals for all our drivers on the way that they have been driving for the year or for 6 months, just to ensure that we are all on the same page and we are a team working together for a common goal. So some of the systems that we use to aid our training are reports from our behavior-based safety processes, our near-miss reporting, our driving hours analysis, our tracking dashboards, our drive cam or onboard camera management systems, our fatigue management system. We also implement health and awareness. We also do briefing and debriefing. A driver is briefed before going on a trip and debriefed after the trip, just to find out if they've gone well. We also do have weekly toolbox talks. These are safety talks on road safety, which we share with our drivers every week. We also have shared learnings. These are learnings from other road crashes or other incidences that could have happened that we share with our drivers. Then we do analysis of all road crashes to show us where our shortfalls are, where is the trend, what is the common cause of these road crashes. Then we implement corrective measures. We also do have our journey management plans and route risk analysis that are done for all the routes that our drivers go in. Okay, that will be that for my presentation.
Hello, everybody. My name is Andrew Spence-Walrich. I'm the MD of WCL and Director and co-owner of Halcyon Tankers, formerly MD of Hargreaves Logistics. So the purpose of this presentation is to give you an overview of the content and benefits of the Break Pledge Road Safety Skills Workshop. The workshops run from 10 o'clock in the morning to 3:30 in the afternoon. Time flies, and most the feedback from the workshops has been very positive. So I really want just to give you an understanding of what's included in the workshop, so that you can decide whether to attend one in the future or indeed send one of your colleagues. So the course is aimed at owners and managers responsible for at-work drivers, whether it be in a car, a van or a truck. We mustn't forget either drivers of the so-called grey fleet, whether they enjoy a car allowance, reclaim a mileage allowance, or use a pool, hired or car share. As your responsibilities as an employer is the same, although the risks are probably even higher. So in my experience, truck drivers are looked after mostly well, although I will share some challenges that will significantly improve safety. Car and van drivers, however, are often neglected, often with no fleet manager responsible for driver safety or the management of the drivers. So it is often a case of somebody, everybody and nobody, and sometimes ends up with the HR department. So pledge training is a flexible driver training for people who drive for work. The intention of the course is to engage, inform and inspire. Delegates are not told what to do, but it gives everybody more facts, more information, more understanding, and makes you think really whether or not your current policies and the current way you manage drivers at work is indeed the best way, and whether there could be any improvements. So we start the course with how much do you know? So we check with delegates before the workshop, and then again at the end of the workshop, mainly so that we can measure increased knowledge as a result of the work that we've done through the day. So for example, we'll cover questions like, how long after drinking alcohol is it safe to drive? Name 3 vehicle checks that should be carried out before every journey, and which is more dangerous whilst driving, hands-free or hands held? So there's a range of questions that people answer at the beginning, and then they answer at the end of the course to see how much their knowledge has changed. The course encourages delegates to adapt policies, change behaviour and reconsider training needs. And really, it's delivered through the power of research and facts, not because you've been told to do something. I think we all know now telling somebody or giving them a piece of paper won't change behaviour. So people will hopefully at the end of the course understand better why change is necessary and why it's beneficial. So BRAKE, as you know, is the road safety charity. We believe that everyone has a right to safe and healthy mobility. The terrible statistic that every 20 minutes somebody is killed or seriously injured on a British road is the challenge. Every crash is a tragedy, each crash is preventable. This is what we're trying to do something about, trying to help companies adapt and change policies and training to improve this position. So pledge training covers 6 areas of occupational road risk, what employers and drivers should be doing to manage the risk, and as I said, educate and engage drivers with road safety messages. Yeah, driving for work is a high risk activity, one of the highest risks things that any of us do actually on any given day. 1.3 million people die on roads each year. Road crashes are the biggest killer of young people aged 5 to 29. Many road deaths relevant for this course involve a vehicle being driven for work. Vehicles driven for work cause extensive pollution, of course, and most importantly, nearly all crashes are caused by human error, not by the vehicles we drive. So we cover, you know, the obvious point that managing road risk can help reduce costs in various areas, and the benefits, other benefits of managing road risk in terms of reputation, customer satisfaction, your CSR strategy, and to all of our colleagues, it helps show how we value them. So the first area that we cover then is slow, which of course is speed, and we cover how speed kills, why it leads to serious injuries and fatalities, and where the risks are greatest. The pledge is that I'll stay under limits and slow down to under 20 miles per hour around schools, homes and shops to protect others. I'll slow right down for bends, brows and bad weather and avoid overtaking. There are some really handy interactive tools for testing candidate knowledge and infographics that make the cause and effect much easier to understand. There's a lot of help with guidance on how to manage driver's speed. Interestingly, as a group in the workshop, we normally agree and prove that most people do not understand stopping distances or the consequences of small increases in speed. This obviously helps people to make their own mind up in terms of whether or not they should be doing something about their own speed. The next area that we cover is sober. And the pledge is that I'll never drive after any alcohol or drugs and won't take any risks the morning after. I'll plan ahead to make sure my friends and I can get home safely, and I'll never get a lift with a drunk or drug driver, and I will speak out if somebody's about to drive on drink or drugs. I think it's fair to say that since changes in the law and as a result of peer pressure, most sensible people attempt not to drive over the limit or take drugs that will affect driving. However, we do look at the key facts and the impact of drink and drugs in the system, even if you are within the legal limit. Interestingly, during the course, we normally prove, and everyone agrees, that most people do not actually know their units, nor how long it takes for alcohol to leave the bloodstream. So with that in mind, we help with a handy morning after calculator. And this is where most people who would consider themselves sensible and law abiding are actually at most risk and putting others at risk. So we cover areas of, drugs that people are taking for medical reasons, reading what's in that little slip of paper, and cover declarations of fit to drive on a daily basis. So the next area, secure. So the pledge is I'll make sure everyone in my vehicle is belted up on every journey and head restraints are properly positioned. I'll choose a vehicle for its safety and ensure it is well maintained. During this section, we talk about why seat belts are important. Car drivers mostly get it, truck and van drivers less so. Many do not consider passengers, and some don't apply the same principles when they get in a taxi or on public transport, for example. So we share a highly impactful video and give important advice on head restraints, an area that people often don't think about, and safe loads in the vehicle and why essential vehicle checks are so important, with some handy advice for drivers and some policy advice for managers. We run through a simple flower check in terms of the areas that car and van drivers should be covering. Truck drivers have to do this as part of the sort of requirement of the O licence, but car and van drivers often do not, and nobody's checking that they do. So we run through fuel lights, oil, water, electrics, and rubber tyres, probably the most important of all of them. The next section is silent, and this is quite challenging. The pledge is that I will never take or make calls or texts when driving. I'll turn off my phone and put other communication devices or put them out of sight and on silent and stay focused on the road. I must say this section probably generates the most discussion as people absorb and think about whether or not they, or indeed their companies, could survive if they weren't able to make or take calls whilst driving. So we talk about driver distraction and the effects of distraction on a driver, and we play another interactive game called Driven to Distraction. Again, interestingly, we normally agree and admit that distraction is a real issue, and that probably everyone that attends this course has missed a motorway turn-off and sometimes wonder how on earth we've got from A to B. So we discuss how fleet managers can adapt policies. Many agree that current policies do not go far enough to keep drivers safe. So it's a challenge. It's not one that you can easily resolve or quickly resolve, but this is a very thought-provoking section, again with facts and evidence as to what the impact is on your driving, even when you're hands-free. So driver distraction, the facts. This is one of the slides during the workshop. Drivers using a phone are 4 times more likely to crash. Texting or checking social media is even more dangerous, but still happens. Importantly, hands-free calls are as dangerous as handheld calls. This is a very important part of the discussion. And other distractions such as programming sat-navs or changing the radio are also a big cause of the increase in the risk of a crash. So the next section is sharp, and the pledge is that I will get my eyes tested every 2 years and wear glasses or lenses at the wheel if I need them. Many companies do have checks on driver license points, for example, but not checks on when their drivers, at-work drivers, last had their eyes tested. Also, I will take regular breaks and never drive if I'm tired, stressed, or on medication that affects drivers. So we discussed driver vision with a powerful video on the consequences felt by one bereaved family member with Brenda's story. We talk in depth about driver fatigue, and this is a much neglected area. Interestingly, we normally agree that we don't do normally enough to protect and prevent drivers from driving when they are fatigued. So we do provide some advice for drivers and what to include in the revised policy. We don't ignore stress either and the impact that can have on a driver. There is far more awareness now, thankfully, around mental health being just as important as physical health. So we talk about ideas for establishing a wellbeing policy too. The last one is sustainability, and the pledges I'll minimise the amount I drive. If I need to drive, I'll make my route as safe as possible and drive efficiently. So this is really a challenge as to whether every journey is necessary and whether or not there are alternatives to driving by car, like public transport, for example. There is a business case for sustainable driving because it lowers fuel consumption, noise pollution and air pollution. There is an evident reduced fleet operating cost, less risk exposure to crashes and loss of life, higher employee well-being, and it does encourage more people walking and cycling in your community. So it is really just a challenge as to whether or not we really think about whether every journey is necessary and more could be done through video conferencing, for example. And I'm sure the current coronavirus crisis will actually make people think a little bit more about this. It's not as difficult perhaps as people thought to keep in touch. So importantly then, this is a beneficial workshop for those that attend, regardless of whether or not they take anything back to their organisation. But we want to support companies in actually thinking about, well, what changes can we make back at base in terms of strategy, management and operations. So in terms of introducing break pledge principles into your organisation, you know, it's a question of support to your CSR strategy, the sustainable safety programme, collaboration with global fleet champions, which is why you're here today. There's a lot of support and guidance on the Global Fleet Champions website to support you bringing these principles back into your organisations. And of course, the employee engagement is always positive. A thought about what further training you might give to your at-work drivers and what support you might give Brakes Road Safety Week, which is in November each year. So in summary, the workshop is there to engage, inspire and inform. It raises a number of challenges, some of which are straightforward and obvious, some of which might be more difficult, but it will certainly be thought-provoking. It is an enjoyable day. The feedback is always positive, and I would encourage you to think about joining one of the courses. So please do visit the Global Fleet Champions website, which will be at the end of the webinar for more information, or my email address is there if you want to have a quick discussion about it, and Brake will give you any more information that you need. So I hope that's been useful and that you enjoy the rest of the webinar. Thank you very much.